You are tuned into Beyond the Label, the podcast that explores trade with purpose. In this episode, we ask what happens when African countries trade more with one another. We are joined by Fairtrade Africa's Executive Director Isaac Tongola and the Western Cape Provincial Parliament's Noko Masipa. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Sandra.
I would like to start off by asking Isaac, why do you believe that intra-Africa trade is such a vital conversation right now?
Thank you, Sandra. Intra-Africa trade is extremely crucial at this point in time, in the sense that we want to promote our economies. And we also have gained, as African states, we have gained a lot of momentum in terms of building infrastructure, but also building platforms where we can leverage our opportunities. We also have grown our financial institutions that can support investments into our various sector, trade, agriculture, manufacturing sectors. So we have gained this momentum, and I think the African countries, up to 54 countries, can leverage the opportunities to work and sell products across the economies. So I think these are big opportunities that African countries can leverage. Also, we are looking at the 2030 kind of vision that have been set by most countries in Africa. And I think it's high time that intra-Africa trade needs to be ramped up so that these countries can actually scale up their deliverables in terms of economic growth, leveraging the strengths on products, value addition, and of course, making sure that the products can be sold across the different countries at a premium price.
Thank you so very much, Isaac. Noko, from someone who's working in government, how are trade policies evolving to support ethical, inclusive trade across African borders?
Thank you very much for hosting me and bringing to Fairtrade Africa friends. Really, thank you for the opportunity to join you and colleagues in a rather cold Cape Town. To your first question, really, if I may go to the first question before I go to the second question. Really, Africa is a rich continent in three core assets, which are land, minerals, and people. But how we use and trade and govern these assets, especially amongst ourselves, remains a serious challenge. This is a conversation that African policymakers must urgently really attend to. Just really on some very important facts that I thought is important to share with you and your viewers is that Africa's population in 2024 is estimated to be at around 1.5 billion. And of that, we expecting the growth to be 2.5 billion by 2050. When it comes to land, Africa has got about 1.2 billion hectares of arable land. And looking at that, Africa holds roughly 60 to 65 of the world's main uncultivated land. So I think this is really kind of the basis for policy making with regards to this. We have had several debates, for example, around the Comprehensive Africa Agricultural Development Program. While it provides a solid framework, but there's been really challenges with regards to follow through. I'm not at the policy making of the international trade. However, we are obviously involved with our colleagues through obviously the agricultural department. So what is important for us is that agricultural trade cannot thrive without the enablers, which include effective traceability system in agriculture, functional ports, accessible and responsive trade and industry officials. So this for me are critical And we definitely need predictable and stable government policies and also stable governance. So these are critical for me. These elements are essential to building an investor confidence, because ultimately you want to create an investor confidence. And as such, companies seeking to operate within and across Africa prioritize reliability, policy consistency, and access to key officials when making those decisions. Really, it is hard time, to be honest with you, that we take a hard look at the tariffs regimes and intercontinental trade practices, which I think is critical. We must do more to prioritize African products and increase the uptake of goods produce and processed within the continent. I think this is very, very important. Produce and processed within the province, within the continent. The big challenge is that we cannot afford to continue sending our products in raw material. Right now in South Africa, we send millions of liters of bulk wines. We also, fruit, also send bulk fruit juice to other parts of the world. We definitely need to find a way that we can process this and bottle this and sell them in bottle. So in short, that's really what I think needs to happen. We got to prioritize Africa. We got to prioritize intertrade as soon as possible. We cannot afford to have coffee that is processed that we are importing from Belgium or from any other part of the world. We've got to process coffee. Moreover, our best franchise coffee should be coming from Ghana, should be coming from Ivory Coast, should be coming from Africa, should not be coming from Europe, because we're the best producer of coffee.
Thank you for that. Noko, I just want to follow up on that response of yours and ask, how are we making it possible for our small producers to be able to export their products to within Africa, south to south, but also to process locally because it's so expensive? How do we, and this is with your government cap, how do we make it possible for legislation and policies to make it possible for our producers to be able to process and export south to south?
Yeah, I think the key question for me really is we've got to ask ourselves, please, what defines a small producer, both globally and obviously within the African continent? We have formal definition of a smallholder farmer in the African context. And how does that compare with the global definition? See, those are really the challenges. Is a small producer defined by the size of land farmed, the value of production, the quantity of quality, output, or perhaps by the level of market access and economic autonomy? We've got to ask ourselves. I think until we have clear definition and clear accepted definition, we risk misdiagnosing the challenges and opportunities faced by these producers. In South Africa, many small-scale farmers facing structural constraints that make participation in global export markets extremely difficult. I was in Uganda, witnessed what the challenges are there, into Nigeria as well. Because exporting obviously is quite costly. It's a costly undertaking. It requires the capacity to really fill the containers with consistent volume, secure, reliable agents, and obviously logistic chains. Spoken about the challenges of infrastructure and trustworthy markets. Most small producers simply cannot do this alone. We've got initiatives, obviously, through our WestPro, for example, and the Department of Trade and Industry that are supporting producers in accessing export markets. But the reality is that very few operate at a viable economic unit capable of sustaining independent export activity. And I think that's the point, that's the takeaway. Very few are operating at a viable economic unit capable of sustaining independent export activity. They remain heavily reliant on state facilitation and are vulnerable to market fluctuation. I don't know if I can really provide this example. I've been to Brazil and during my first term in Parliament, Parliament, and where we encountered what we refer to as small family farms. Their size ranged between 2,000 and 10,000 hectares, a scale that overshadows what is considered a small farm in South Africa and in Africa at large. Yet these Brazilian producers still benefit from classifications that enables targeted support, including access to subsidies, infrastructure, and favorable financing. Many of these countries, Brazil included, are also our trade competitors and product exporters into our market. So the key, I think, is that us as government, we must start moving beyond a narrow focus on policy frameworks. We need to shift towards innovative, result-driven governance that actively support the small producers, not just with policy documents, but with market access, infrastructure, finance, and skills development. This support must enable them to access the regional African markets and where physical global markets regardless of their scale.
Okay, thank you very much, Noko. Isaac, from a fair trade perspective, what opportunities does increased trade between African countries open up for smallholder farmers and producers within fair trade specifically?
Thank you, Sandra. And I agree with the Honorable Noko on his emphasis that there needs to be a better way of working in terms of supporting the trade, the intra-Africa trade, but also going out of the box, not just thinking about policy formulation, but also reaching out to create market access for the small-scale producers. And that's the way to increase on the success already achieved. There's more to be done. So I agree with the Honorable Noko 100% on that. But maybe one thing I would like to emphasize on the question you asked him around what exactly needs to be done to ramp up this intra-African trade. Also, I think the trading partners, the countries that are trading within Africa, they need to harmonize regulatory approaches in terms of how they can work, and that will actually ease the movement of goods from one country to another within the continent. So that harmonization is very important in terms of also easing the non-tariff barriers, which actually hamper and actually even stop the movement of goods from one country to another. So that's very crucial. And just making sure that they can actually streamline those regulations that facilitate the movement of goods and trade is very crucial. But back to your question, Sandra, I think a level playing ground in the intra-African trade through, for example, the harmonization of regulations will ensure that these producers, when they produce, they can sell from one country to another within the African continent. And they can also create market for their products. One of the biggest hindrances is market access, as Noko has referred to. And we want to create a bigger market for our producers. They produce, yes, but where can they sell? We sell, for example, fair trade terms in Europe, most of our products. But if we can have markets in Africa, I think that will enhance the operations of these producers in terms of producing, but also being able to sell. But not only just to sell. I think that will also be an avenue and an incentive for these producers to add value to their products so that they can also position these products and price them on the African markets. So these will be very key advantages for these producers, not forgetting that also opening this intra-African trade will be an incentive to investors to come and invest in those producer supply value chains. I think most of these investors will know that when they invest, for example, in value addition, these products will easily be sold on the markets in the African continent, and they can easily get back their money after having invested in the crop value chains in Africa. So those are some of the very key outputs that would come from a seamless intra-African trade environment. And we look forward to that at Fair Trade Africa, working with all the other stakeholders, governments, but also other, for example, investment institutions that can help to open up these big opportunity that we have.
One of the most overlooked but really critical components of the smallholder farmers, in terms of sustainability, is succession planning. It is essential that to involve the next generation in the farming business cycle. It's really and early on. I will emphasize that these young people are our future investors, and we've got really a big number in terms of youth in our countries. They will be the ones to build enterprises around the family farm, develop vertical integration opportunities, and unlock new markets in smarter and more effective way. So I think that's very crucial that we get our succession planning, and it's where government, in terms of policies around succession planning and building this family farms into bigger farms, bigger producers, and obviously, being able to vertically integrate and value add into their products to ensure that, they don't send, raw materials from their the farm gate.
Exactly. Succession planning is very crucial, especially in the farming sector, where you have, for example, in the cocoa sector, you have most of the people actively involved are the elderly people. So creating capacity and awareness creation to the young people and empowering them through training and linking them up to, for example, investors and specialists who can work with them so that they can be more productively involved in the farming sector is very crucial. And that is what we are doing in Fair Trade Africa through thematic focus across different crop value chains. So capacity building, but also helping these small and medium-sized entrepreneurs, essentially the young people, to access financing, which can help them then to start up, for example, agricultural entities or to get profitably involved in agriculture. That is what we're doing as Fair Trade Africa, but we believe to scale up on these, we partner across with the government entities and all other stakeholders so that these can be mainstreamed. Just to emphasize what the Honorable Noko is saying, that we need to think about that seriously. Not to forget that when we're talking about succession, digitization is very key. I think these will be a good output from intra-African trade, where we digitize, for example, when goods are moving across borders. We need to, for example, digitize facilities at the borders where these goods are moving so that we don't have hindrances. So security and digitizing those facilities that can enable goods movement to be seamless at the border points is very crucial. But again, the young people will come in very handy to help in that. And that will help to speed up, I think, the intra-African trade onboarding process in terms of scaling up the volumes of trade and also the values.
Thank you very much. Noko, what are some sectors or products that hold real promise for south-to-south trade?
Look, we've got the advantage from this south part of the world, South Africa. We've got the advantage in terms of the produce and the production of wine. Wine SA cannot continue, as I said earlier, exporting millions of liters of wild wines to other parts of the world. If you look at the numbers, I think we only exporting about 21 million liters of wine to Africa. We produce something like 800 to 1 million liters of wine, and 400 million liters of that we export to Europe, and 400, roughly, just under 400 we consume here locally, That's one of the products that I do think that Africa intertrade can really work very well. And also, fruit SA through citrus and other, fruit producing areas are producing quite a lot of fruit juice, which they exported to environ to the rest of the world. But there's very little that's happening between Africa. And one of the problems that they normally, highlight is the issue of the infrastructure, connectivity, internet, and obviously, physical infrastructure. It's too costly to obviously, trade or to travel between Africa. Those areas need to be looked at to ensure that these products are able, to be exported within the continent. So, others will be your plant-based products that show strong potentials like your maize, your wheat, your vegetables, your sugar, and potentially even some niche products like dates and pineapples. Additionally, I think the trade of agricultural inputs like tractors, machinery, and digital technologies also present quite an opportunity for us in Africa. Those are the few that I can think of right now.
Isaac, I would like to throw that at you as well and ask for you, with certified products, fair trade certified products, what are the products that we are seeing that is showing growth and demand for South-to-South trade?
Exactly. Where we have made progress, Sandra, and where we see that we have an opportunity to ramp up market access and also sales for producers is around coffee, tea, and cocoa. Farmers are starting to sell these in the countries in Africa. But I think what's very crucial is to link them to more investors who can help them to access the right expertise and the right investment, the right level of investments in terms of financial support, so that they can increase the levels of producing these value-added products for the local markets. I think if that can happen, financial access and expertise to get the right machineries to help them, for example, in repackaging, that will help them to actually be able to position those products in a good way and price them appropriately. So across those three, we see a lot of potential momentum that we can make in the short term.
Okay, thank you so very much. In closing, I want to ask both of you, looking ahead, what would it take to build an intra-Africa trade system that is not just thriving, but it's also ethical, it's sustainable, and it can inspire trust, investor trust and confidence within Africa?
I thought I needed to just add on what Isaac just said about, investment. And I think one of the areas that we haven't really explored as much as we should is the area of blended finance to support our smallholder farms. Here in South Africa, we have just signed, not signed, but there's been a launch of EU fund that was provided to Land Bank to support smallholder farmers, and obviously, support the transformation work that is being done in that particular space in the wine industry, for example, for that matter. So I think it is very important that we get to really work with the blended finance market to find those markets that are able to support our smallholder farmers with the grant funding and obviously leveraging from the government and going to the private sector as well. Because in doing so, you are actually, de-risking some of the projects that are really struggling and some of the smallholder farmers that are challenged. But I think to your question, really, one of the things that I have noted is that we need to remove the red tape, our borders, the red tapes and tariff, as Asad said, we've got to invest in infrastructure. There's just no two ways about it. We've got to invest in infrastructure so that we can be able to connect these producers into the market. We've got to create a policy environment that is able to attract investors, and by ensuring that stable regulatory frameworks that are really stable, we got to deal with corruption. We got to face it. There's no two ways about it. We've got to deal with corruption and ensure that the market has got confidence in how we do things. We've got to deploy skilled professionals at every level of government. Cannot be correct that our good professionals are only celebrated at the World Bank, at the United Nations, and at the IMF, while here back at home we fail to create space for them to lead and to innovate. That's really betrayal of our own talent. We've got to make it easier and cheaper to do business across the borders. And most importantly, improve connectivity, as I have said. It is important. Connectivity, both physical and digital, we've got to improve it. That's the way to go. There's just no way that we can do our business without really stronger technical and digital support and obviously infrastructure. So those are, I think, are my view around, your question is to how do we really move forward in terms of really supporting our smallholder funds and ensure that there's fair trade across everything.
Thank you so much, Isaac.
Thank you, Sandra. For me, I think the African states, all stakeholders, investors, all financial institutions, they need to own their own space. They need to take responsibility of where they want to go in terms of economic growth, protecting the opportunities they have, but also keep that international linkage. The South to North trade should remain, but also the inter-African trade opportunities should be grown. So I think how the financial institutions can avail funding, for example, for some of these activities that will enable inter-African trade, those investments, the engagements that will enable that are very crucial. The bigger voice through advocacy that the stakeholders can have is very important. Federal Africa, we're very ready to engage. For example, we are talking about the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement. This needs to move fast. It's a geopolitical initiative. If it moves fast, that will put a lot of impetus in the speed at which this inter-African trade can happen. I think geopolitical alignment across diplomatic course across the countries is very important. This will create a lot of understanding. And with that understanding, a lot of these trade activities can also be well facilitated across countries. Talking about visas, I think that alignment can help to speed up the trade across the different countries. And also just to emphasize the need for harmonization of regulations. If, for example, we're talking about SADC or East Africa Community or ECOWAS, harmonizing regulations around how those countries in those blocks can trade will help a lot in terms of, for example, standardizing fees and levies, and that will help on the planning and the movement of products across those borders. So I see those as very key takeaways that will help to enable this inter-African trade going forward at policy level, but also at investor level, where the public and private sector are engaging in public-private partnerships that will enable these initiatives to move at a much needed high pace, and that will increase the pace of trade growth. Now it's for example, the East African Community, the trade volumes are only growing at below 1%. But the expected rate is around 30%. So you can imagine if that can happen, then there's a lot of inter-African trade that can happen until profit our producers, our manufacturers, and all the people involved in the whole supply chain. And we see that opportunity being leveraged if everyone can engage in a more profitable and mutual manner.
Thank you so much, Isaac. If anyone in closing, if there's anything that's burning on your heart that you want to say in closing to this topic?
Yeah, I think from my part, from fair trade point of view, we see the future so bright through fair trade. And I think working in partnerships is very crucial. And this is how we sustain and leverage risks. And I think going forward, this is how we engage in the sector, contributing as free trade, but also engaging with partners like where we work, for example, in South Africa, Cape Town, engaging with the local government, for example, from where the Honorable Noko is working. If we can work in partnership, then there's a lot we can do in terms of scaling up and sustaining our successes.
Noko, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to say in closing, South Africa's trade policies have gone through significant evolution since the end of apartheid. We have moved from a protectionist import substitution model to a more open and export-oriented economy. And I must applaud the South African government in that regard. This shift has included multilateral tariff and liberalization, the establishment of preferential trade agreements, such as AGOA and the EU SADC EPA, as you know it, and a growing focus on regional integration to the SADC, and now the African Continental Free Trade Area. And our strategy obviously has always aimed to diversify the export, attract investment, and stimulate employment. But challenges really remain: infrastructure deficit, red tape, and poor access to capital across the continent continue to hold back trade and development. These issues impact not only South Africa, but the continent at large. We are experiencing this limiting the full potential of the Africa Continental Free Trade Areas and other regional initiatives. But I think going forward, I think we need to definitely have this kind of conversation and look at ways of really implementing some of the areas that we have agreed upon at regional level or even at continental level. I think key for me is that something that I'm strongly advocating is that to have a parliamentary network that really look at this fair trade issues and inter-trade in Africa, so that we can start getting some of these things implemented and proper oversight, and some of the issues that we constantly raise, about the issues of lack of inter-trade as such. Yeah, thanks really for hosting me, and really thanks Isaac once again for really joining me and made you very topical debate.
Thank you so much to both Noko and Isaac for joining us. Intra-Africa trade, it's a conversation that is on many people's mouths or lips at the moment, but it's about being intentional. It's about realizing that as Africans, we are able to trade with one another. We are able to gain investor confidence, investor trust, but it's about being intentional. For Fair Trade Africa, this is Sandra and Vlovo.